I have a workshop later today. So far, great. Good rest after 2 sessions yesterday.
Yeah, you worked hard yesterday. Surprise, you jumped in last minute. Self-care looked good. I saw a chunk of that.
It was, yeah.
All right, we're on time. Steve, do you want to say anything before we begin?
Not particularly the standard stuff. So if you're in the room, which is pretty much everyone, make sure have your cameras on if you can, because it's nice to get the feedback. However, you don't need to. It will be recorded. So if you volunteer for anything, be mindful of that. And otherwise, yeah, it's a nice little session. We'll share some extra stuff towards the end, but enjoy it and ask any questions and I can answer that for you.
Okay, everyone. So this is a session on embodied yoga principles as used for in yoga for yogis and yoga teachers with myself and Patricia in Mexico. Patricia will be doing most of the demonstrating today, though she's a therapist as well as a yoga teacher and experienced in EYP. More just she's got a bit of space in her house. So yeah, we'll be both of us today. Do you want to say hello, Patricia?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Seeing lots of familiar faces. We've been seeing each other maybe every day this week.
Some of your regulars. Let's find out who's here. Could you turn your cameras on pretty, please? I don't mind if you're outside, like off, or if you're doing your housework or you're walking around, that's fine. But I'd love to be able to see as many people as possible, get a sense of who's here. As I said, if you're doing other things, I don't mind. I appreciate life goes on. So please do turn your camera on if you are dressed in any way. And you don't mind. I appreciate it can also just get like too much zoom, so I understand that. All right, so let me find out a little bit about you guys. Who is a yoga teacher? Could you put the number of years you've been teaching yoga in the chat? So give me a sense of the experience levels here. If it's 0, put 0. But if it's 0 and you're a practitioner, you might put 0 and then dash 5 years for practice, for example. You'll get a sense of the level of people who are here. How long have you been doing yoga for, Patricia?
Doing yoga as a practitioner 17 years. Yeah. Teaching 13.
I've been doing yoga since I was 16. So what's that? 25 years. And teaching not at all, except, so it's good I've got you here to help, because you can teach from the actual yoga teacher's perspective. I've taught a few classes for Vidyadasa when he's been ill and stuff like that, but generally I'm not teaching classes day to day.
I can imagine how that turned out.
It was great. People were like, this is the weirdest yoga class they've ever had. So yeah. Cool. 20 years practice, 8 years teaching. Great. Come on, lots of you haven't written anything. Give us a number. It's not too much to ask. It's a small thing to ask. Not a yoga teacher, a few years practice, no problem. So we're going to talk about both teaching and practicing yoga. Most of what we have to say will go across both. And what styles can you throw, like your, I know it's probably several, but can you put your main style of yoga in the chat? Mine has been Hatha / Scaravelli, a little bit of Iyengar, a little bit of Yin, but probably if I were to write one word, I would just write Hatha. Now, I'm told it's pronounced Hatha in the Sanskrit and not Hatha, which is how I was told for many years it was pronounced. Hatha. Any others? Any yin people? Wave your soft, slow hands. Any Ashtangis, Vinyasa people? Shorasha anterior deltoids. Yeah, what's your main style, Patricia? How do you describe your yoga? I know it's complicated.
Yes, it's complicated. That's the description. But I started with Vinyasa for many years. And during that time I think I never gave like actual classes, but I did attend Ashtanga workshops. So that sort of influenced the first part of my practice. And then Vinyasa with Yin, Vinyasa with dance, Yin with dance, just Yin, and sort of like that's the end result so far.
Cool. Okay, so when we started Embodied Yoga Principles 5 years ago, we deliberately called it Embodied Yoga Principles because we wanted it to be a fit with any style of yoga. So it was quickly taken up by coaches and other people, but we'd originally designed it for you guys, for yogis. And it really came from my dissatisfaction with a lot of yoga, where I'd be in a yoga class and it would be, relaxing and maybe good for my health. And I'd practice my mindfulness. But for me, I was always interested in psychology. I was always interested in, but what is this revealing about who I am as a person, and how am I developing myself as a person? And is my life really going to get better if I have even longer hamstrings? Is that really going to help? Yeah. And this, what I was generally offered was either a sort of athletic view of yoga or an Eastern view that was deep, but I had to kind of take on like a Buddhist or a Hindu kind of framework, maybe a tantric framework. And I realized that there wasn't so much a sort of Western but deep approach. The other thing I realized is, from my embodiment training background, some of the things that were obvious to me weren't obvious to my yoga teacher students. So yoga teachers would come to me for embodiment training, and when they wanted to go into coaching, for example, and certain things just were completely clear to me. I'd say, well, you could do this in your yoga class. And they were like, whoa, I've never thought of that. I was like, cool. Yeah. And also they learned it really quick because they already had this language of movement and the body. They're already aware of their posture and their breath. So when I taught them embodiment, they were really good students because they already had like a lot of training and a lot of structure, compared to, say, my business coaching students who are like, what's this? So they had certain advantages as well, so I like working with yoga teachers. So that was really the birth of embodied yoga. And then we started teaching yoga teachers, and we called it principles because we didn't want it to be like a style. So it's not like you have to convert to doing things this way, right? And actually there are EYP teachers now who are combining it with hatha, with yin, with vinyasa, acro, even everything. You can combine it with any style of yoga. And we call that EYP light. So EYP light or blended is the EYP system put into other types of yoga. Yeah. Why would you do that? Well, to increase the self-awareness part, to increase the life application part, if you're interested in that. Not everyone is. Some people want to do handstands on Instagram, don't they? Okay. Some people want to pretend to be Indian monks. People have different goals. Yeah. But if you're interested in psychological depth and real world application, that's kind of our niche. And it's not to say that other styles of yoga don't do it, but as far as I know, we're the only style that just does it. That's the only thing we do in EYP. Yeah. So you can take the principles and blend them into your class, or you can do like a full EYP class. Does that make sense? So some people choose to do like full EYP classes or workshops, usually workshops actually. Other people just choose to sort of sprinkle a little bit in their class. So the students will be doing warrior pose, and they'll say, who's that familiar to? All right. And actually, like, I had this observation. I used to go to this yoga class, Vidyadasas, at the Buddhist center for many, many years. And there was one girl who was really sort of shy and not confident. And she would always do her warrior pose like this. Okay. And then Vidyadasa would correct her, and she'd do it like this. Okay. And then the next week, she'd be doing this again. Yeah. Now, I talked to that girl many, many times because she's a friend of mine. I'd go to that class for years, and I could see that it was correlated with her personality. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So why is no one talking about that? And it's quite easy for a yoga teacher to start just in a light way, bringing a bit of that in, noticing that business student with the type A personality just always going into his warrior like this. And I'm sure this isn't just Britain. Do you see sort of similar patterns, Patricia, in Mexico with students?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I always encourage people to explore. And for example, I would give them options for a pose. Like, you can go straight into Shavasana after this, or you can go and do one more vinyasa, or do a vinyasa with a double Chaturanga. And watch, who are you? Why are you choosing that? Like, you need to show off, or you feel that you're not gonna be having like the best workout if you're not sweating yourself off. Why? Where's that coming from?
Yeah, another one would be like you're doing tree pose, right? And you fall over. Okay, so now if you're doing tree pose just to develop your balance or your ankle strength, that's fine. But actually, there's real opportunity there, isn't there? To notice how you respond to that. Are you proud? Are you ashamed? Do you make a joke of it? Like, what do you do? All right? You get competitive with the person next to you. And now these dynamics are all happening, and it doesn't really do anything to just say, well, try not to do that, because human beings will do that. Your mind will do that. Yeah. So instead, we can actually bring some awareness to that, because until we have awareness, we don't have choice. We can actually look at our patterns. Yeah. Equally, we can use the poses that you already know as yoga teachers in your life. There's a question I'll come to in a minute. If you keep the questions a bit shorter, that would be great. I can read them when I'm teaching. So I'll give you an example. A classic example I often use is I walked into a yoga class and I was there just on time. The first class pose they did was a forward bend, like a hanging forwards bend. Yeah. And I was actually, before I came, I was on the phone and I was annoyed with someone. We were having an argument. And I came in kind of angry and I noticed that. And then we did the forward bend and I noticed that I stopped being angry with them. I just like let it go. Okay. And I thought, that's interesting. As someone who gets annoyed by a fair bit, I'm that kind of person. So is everyone in my family. Maybe I should do that pose more often. Yeah. And then I thought, yeah, but what do I do when I'm not in a yoga class? Because Patricia, can you demonstrate like a standing forward bend? If Patricia does that in the middle of her business meeting or when she's talking to her kids, right, it's going to look really weird. Okay. Now in Brighton, you might get away with it, but in most of the world, people are going to be like, what are you doing? Okay. But instead, she can do what we call a micro pose. So a micro pose of forward bend. What do you think it is? What's like a way of embodying that quality without fully doing the pose? Okay. Try this with one hand. Bah. Okay, this is an ancient mantra. Everyone want to try it? Put your wrists in the air. Give it a try. I can see you. Come on, join in. I'm not your dancing monkey. Okay, and then just go, fuck it. Okay, whatever. That's the same forward bend, right? Same energy. Never mind. Letting go. So we call this pose letting go pose. Some of you are doing throwing away. That's a bit of a different energy. Feel the difference? And you can do a standing forward bend throwing away, right? Patricia, would you mind demoing again? Sorry to keep bothering you. I've got much space today. So you can do that more active, slightly more yang. Is that like, what do you want to get rid of and actually throw it away? It's a little bit more, yeah? And then we can actually use that for your life. So Patricia, like, what do you want to like get rid of or throw away in your life at the moment?
Oh God.
Could be a belief, could be some stress you've had, could be a relationship. What you decide.
That I'm very comfortable without a relationship. So maybe that.
Okay, so what's the thing you want to throw away? You tell me that you don't mind sharing.
Sharing my space, my time with someone.
Okay, so throw that away. Use the practice as a letting go practice, the same with child's pose, rather than simply as a hamstring stretch. Does this make sense? And you still get the hamstring stretch, right? So you don't get rid of the physical layer, you're just adding this layer, this second foundation of mindfulness, this layer of the emotional layer. It's making sense to people? I would love to see a few more people with cameras on, because it is very difficult to teach a class when I can just see 3 faces. There's a load of people here without cameras on. Please, please, please help me out. Okay, there's a question from Lisa. Okay, someone said, oh yeah, so on Facebook we talk about working with university lecturers and how they can be difficult to teach. So people who are hyper intellectual often analyze everything to death, right? And that can be me too on certain days. So it's important when you do the inquiries in EYP, you keep people in the actual experience of it. So today is a bit more conversational, but if you didn't go to any of the classes in the week, you probably won't get that much from today, because it's the experience of doing the poses like Patricia's doing that is quite key. Yeah. In terms of working with other people who are maybe a little bit resistant to kind of working with the body, I mean, I've done that with business people, police, military. My attitude has always just been to say, hey, give it a try. If you don't get anything from it, that's fine, but give it a go. And most people would try things, also linking it to what they care about. Yeah. So it's like, depending on the group you're working with, they care about different things. Like if I'm working, like I know Ileana's a doctor, right? If I'm working with a bunch of doctors, I'll say, who's busy and has a lot of stress? All the doctors are going to say yes. Right? Like there's no way. And also I know doctors tend to drink too much, right? So I might link it to that. You can always link it to things that people, if I know everyone's a parent, I'll link it to that. So linking it to things people care about, right? Like most people care about their happiness. Most people care about their kids. Most people care about their job. So it's just linking it. If I just do it in the abstract, then, you know, I mean, this is actually really a more general point about yoga and EYP. Who here, the most important thing in the world for you is being flexible? No one. right? No one. I don't think anyone's put their hand up except one sarcastic hand. Why? Because that is actually a fairly pointless thing. I mean, beyond basic health, right? Like, I don't know about you, I want to maintain some basic health as I get older. That's great. You know, I need to be able to tie my shoelaces and things, right? So beyond that basic level of flexibility and health generally, it's not that important, is it? Like, if I can put my foot behind my head, or chew my toenails, how does that help me in my life? Okay, so actually, what do you care about? What do you care about? Type in the chat, what do you and your students care about? If you're a teacher, put both. Relationships, right? So if the yoga you're teaching isn't helping people's relationships, you're missing a trick. Yeah, so what you can be more or less warrior-like in a relationship, right? Make sense? You've ever been married to someone that's very warrior-like or not very warrior-like? There's different pros and cons to that. Okay, who's quite warrior-like generally? Yeah, there's a reason this is called warrior pose and not fluffy kitten pose, right? It has a quality. Whoever invented that back in the day in India wasn't stupid, right? It has a quality to it. So that quality is what we're dealing with. That's what we're interested in EYP. It's happening anyway. When you do Warrior 2 in your classes, you're activating that quality. That quality is challenging your students who don't have much of it. Yeah? Like the nice girl who always does it this way, because she didn't like taking up space and being seen. She didn't like being extended. So it's not a technical mistake that she was making. You know, being less stressed. Okay, yes, absolutely. So I find normal yoga is pretty good for stress. Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily get at the root cause of stress. Let me give you an example. If you have someone in your life who's abusing you in small or large ways, the problem is not that you haven't done enough meditation. The problem is that you have a dickhead in your life. Okay? That's technical terms from the ancient Sanskrit. So the problem is not that you need to do more yoga meditation to relax. The problem is you need to get this person out of your life. Does it make sense? Yeah? So yoga's great, normal yoga's great for dealing with the symptoms of stress, but not the root cause. All right, unless we're talking about becoming enlightened, which is the really root cause. But on a day-to-day level, not being able to say no to people, for example, we have a pose for that. Patricia, would you mind demonstrating? I know she can say no if she doesn't want to. So we have a pose that demonstrates this, which you could fit into a yoga sequence, right? This could fit into a sun salutation, for example. Just a no pose, if you wouldn't mind, Patricia. Yeah. Okay. So that pose doesn't exist in normal yoga. Okay. What you do have in normal yoga, however, is a plank pose. Would you be so kind? Okay. And I won't keep you there for long, don't worry. Or even worse, a chaturanga. Okay, that's a no pose. And you got on your knees. So a chaturanga, if she stops pushing away, her nose will hit the floor. Yeah, there's subtleties to it, but it's an active push. It has to be, or else she'd collapse. Okay, so there's actually, thank you, Patricia. There's actually an active pushing away pose in normal yoga, but most people don't think of it that way. Yeah. So for students who need to practice their boundaries, their active pushing away, that's a good pose. And they're doing it anyway, but they're probably not connecting on the emotional level. Make sense? So in traditional Buddhist practice, there's different what's called foundations of mindfulness. Sensation is the first one. That's physicality. That's what most yogis are paying attention to. The second one is valence, feeling tone, Vedana, a more emotional kind of feeling tone. Yeah. And we're focusing on that second one primarily. Making sense? Give me a thumbs up if this is making sense. So this is, it's not instead of the yoga you do, it's like another layer. Yeah, this layer is happening. What we teach students to be is be more skillful with it, be more aware of it. Cool, be more intentional. Yes, thank you. Cool. Good. Questions? It's quite a small group, so feel free to unmute yourself or to write it. Can they unmute themselves, Steve? Is that a thing? What have you found useful, Patricia, sort of integrating into your more traditional yoga classes?
I really like to go with themes on classes. So one thing that I really like about EYP is that you can work, for example, if you choose receiving, it can be from like a very active vinyasa style movement, work it, breathing, core, and, you know, deserving and work for what you deserve and what you want. But it could also be inserted into a more softer and, you know, just open and receive, nothing else to do. So it can be adapted either way.
Yeah. So it's sort of two things you can really bring in from EYP into any yoga style. One would be the poses themselves, like bringing in, you know, a no pose you could incorporate into your sun salutation. Easy, no problem. Yeah. Another one though would be the quality of the poses. So how is it to do every pose in a more receptive way, for example? To stress the embodiment of receptivity, you'd probably better, if that was your theme, Thave, for the class, you could teach receiving pose first. We have a pose for that. Patricia wouldn't mind showing it for a moment. And then you can do the entire class with that feel. Yeah. Also, you could bring in a certain amount of coaching into the class, even without going verbal. So Patricia's doing her practice, I'm teaching the class. I can just say to Patricia, hey, you don't need to say out loud, but what do you want to receive in your life? What do you want to ask for? Or I could just say, hey, is that normal for you to be in that receptive mode? Or are you more of a giver? If you want to do giving pose, do you tend to be more of a giver than a receiver? Is that a habit? You know, we could get into a whole thing of Mexican women are conditioned to be givers and not receivers, and, you know, a whole cultural thing, right? We've talked about before. Yeah. And she doesn't have to say a word. So we don't have to like stop and do therapy and start talking. We just bring her attention to those qualities. Yeah. Or we could do any other pose, but with a receiving quality. So you could do warrior pose in a receiving kind of a way, right? Instead of a really yang way, you can do your warrior, but with that sense of like, yeah, really being in the pose, receiving the pose. Yeah, it could be even more subtle than that. You could still have your hands in the normal position, but have that quality of receptivity through you. Slightly different version than if I gave you to say, I don't know, the quality of enthusiasm in that pose. That would be a different way to do it, right? So that's our enthusiasm pose. And then adding that quality to this, like, yeah, warrior, let's go for it. It's a different vibe, right? So you're actually changing, thank you, Patricia, you're truly changing a lot about what you're teaching just by adding in these qualities. And we've also added in this coaching or self-inquiry type process, which is a little bit different than just doing stretching and exercise and relaxation. Yeah, going into a coaching process. So it's another layer. And actually, students will have insights in yoga anyway. I don't know about you, but I've seen students have emotional release in class. You'll be doing pigeon pose and they'll start crying, right? Or shavasana, and they'll just let go of something and have this big kind of, you know, at the end of class, they'll come up to you and hug you and say, oh my God. So that will happen anyway. You have that happen, Patricia? People kind of have their releases, emotions come up.
Yes. And many times people would like, what did we do? Like, it's a yoga class, but it's not regular yoga, is it?
Yeah. So you're bringing that layer to people. You know, what I would say is in many ways, the more EYP you do, the less relaxing it can be. So we're not trying to relax our students. Now, in EYP, you might do a certain amount of relaxation at the beginning and the end. Okay. But actually, it's about insight generation and skill building. It's about developing a whole new way of being, and that can be quite challenging. So I always sort of say, sometimes I go to Vidyasa's class, which is really like EYP-ish now. And it used to be just really like Buddhist chill yoga. And some days I'm like, oh, will you shut up? I just want to relax. You know, I don't want to like think about all my deep issues, you know, and have emotional breakthroughs. And, you know, there's a place for both, right? And it depends what mood you're in. So when I teach at yoga festivals, for example, I've done a whole bunch of times, people will turn up and they'll, you know, big tent or whatever, a couple of hundred people. And I'll sort of get them all in the middle and say, look, I'm probably going to make some of you cry. This is going to be really difficult. And are you sure you want to be here? And some of them are like, no, I'm on holiday. I'm like, we'll leave now. Yeah. Now, it's not to say you can't do a class based around joy, for example. We have a lot of joyful, like, you know, enthusiasm pose and a lot of joyful poses. But often there is this awareness building, which is a bit challenging. Did I see a couple of people with raised hands? Lisa C? Yeah, I'll unmute you.
Thank you. Yeah. two of these wonderful teachers this week have just by the by mentioned their own grief with their aging bodies. And that was a massive relief for me to hear it, that even people like Karen and Laura can be feeling this too. And I'm aware of aging, and I have ideas from the poses as what I could do, what poses I could bring in to maybe cope with some of the issues, but I'm not going to give them away now. I'm going to throw that question to you. Aging, how can this help the aging, people aware of the aging process?
Okay, so we're all subject to old age, disease, and death, right? Basic kind of noble truth. In now, normal yoga says, well, let's age better, which is also good. Like, I go to Pete Blackaby's yoga class in Brighton, and it's full of all these little old ladies. It's brilliant. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with keeping our spines flexible and, keeping our hips open. That's great. I do all that. Okay, I'm in better shape than nearly all of my friends I grew up with at 41. They look way worse than me. Yeah. However, it doesn't really help us with the emotional side, does it? So, apart. We're all running face first towards death. That is the truth. So for me, there's a letting go and a surrender pose, are two poses that definitely easy. But then it might depend. You might want to be a worrier about getting older. I know those old people that are like, I'm old and I'm tough and I don't care. Or you might want a sense of humor. So it might be about joke pose, or it might be about keeping your passion. So I can't give one answer to that because it depends what's the problem when you age. Right, like what starts to go wrong? Yeah, Patricia.
Yeah, one thing that I work with women, in particular in the aging process, it's finding another place of value for yourself, because we're usually attached to the idea that a younger body is the valuable thing, or the sexual appeal, or the whatever. And sometimes we haven't cultivated what's my value now when I step into another stage. So poses that give you like a lot of dignity and spine and stuff like this is what I stand for, usually help finding your new place.
Yeah, it's going to be different. Like we have a sensuality pose, and then we have a care pose, which is very much like mother kind of energy. Yeah. And then we have other poses that are more like elder kind of energy. So in terms of the life, you can do a workshop on the whole life process through EYP. Some that are very childlike, some that are very mature, queenly, this kind of energy.
Thank you. Fantastic replies. And I'm really pleased you brought the positivity of aging, because it's easy to focus on the negativity when my legs giving way and stuff like that. So a little play here to do a program on aging as well.
Aging. Yeah, we could do that. It's not a bad idea, actually. Make a note, Steve. Thank you, Lisa. Nice to see you. HB. Like a pencil.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's Heidi. I've got a question. I am not a yoga teacher, but I'm a Qigong instructor. And I have been doing this for myself for quite a while, using it for emotional release. So my question is, this is what I want, to do with the embodiment. And I know you said yoga, but I see so many similarities. So I guess it's that's cool, isn't it? If I go on the course.
I almost wish I hadn't called it embodied yoga, because loads of people, I just saw a therapist as well in the chat. Therapist, come to the next session. The next one's for you. This one's for the yogis, right? So look, we had a lot of dancers come, coaches come, Qigong, martial arts. I mean, it's really just embodiment principles.
Yeah, that's fine. That's cool.
The difference is we made it into poses, and poses work really well for yogis. Okay, but also
that's fine. But there's so many similarities. I just want to make sure that was cool. Fine.
You'd probably buy this sort of 3 packages, and you'd probably buy the one that just says facilitators if you're anything other than the yogi. So there's one for sort of normal people who do a bit of yoga, and then there's one there which says facilitators, and a lot of it will talk to me about coaching or whatever, but actually it's applicable to anyone who has a body modality. And as I said, you just blend it with whatever you're doing. I don't mind at all.
Yeah, there's one that's called coaches and the other one teachers. So I was looking at the teacher, but then I just replaced the Qigong instead of all the yoga, I guess.
Okay, yeah, I'd say the yoga teaches one of those a little bit yoga focused. So for example, I'm going to ask Patricia to do a sun salutation in a little bit, and that's quite a specific yoga thing. So that's
fine. It was just to get the micro poses. That was it. But fine, that's cool. Thanks.
Micro poses, the best way to get the micro poses is to do each of the poses yourself really thoroughly in the big version. And it's like that sort of gives you the sense of it. And then you just, the micro poses are easy.
Yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't recommend trying to just take the micro poses without doing the big poses.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fine. Thanks.
Cool. And Ileana, a question now. We're going to spend like a week together in New York.
No, I wanted to say that I am a yoga practitioner. So I've been to a lot of different classes, and most of the time it's focused on the athletic, but I don't know if I'm putting that in there or they are. So I just really appreciated the other parts that really highlight how does your body feel in this, and how to be a little kinder, gentler, have some compassion for not needing to do it a certain perfect way. So I found that a lot of the teachers in this week that you've had highlighted that. So I appreciated that.
Thank you. And yeah, there's lots of things you can do with yoga. You know, yoga's not one thing. There's no one person that says, you know, can say what it is. But it's, for me, I'm glad that this possibility exists. You know, like there's nothing wrong with fitness. I go to the gym, I do pull-ups. That's for fitness. There's nothing wrong with that. But personally, for me, when I go to a yoga class, I'm not trying to do that. Yeah. For me, I'm either doing relaxation and mindfulness, or I'm doing the kind of more psychological investigation, embodiment work that we do. One of the two things. And you might have a different frame on it, like people that have a tantric frame or, you know, Hindu frame, you know, there's different frames. And I think as long as the yoga teacher's being clear what they're offering and the method fits the purpose, is fine. I just wish people were more honest about it. Because, you know, I see people trying to get skinny and get a nice ass for Instagram and calling it spiritual. And I'm just like, no, you're doing fitness, which is fine, but it's something else, you know? So let's all just be a bit more honest about what we're doing, and then actually use the method that really fits what we want to do. All right. So if you're interested in depth and psychology and life application, then this is a pretty bloody good system. You know? Not to say there aren't others. There's other cool teachers out there. Cool. Let me show you. Fabienne, you have a question? Yeah. Can't hear you. Nothing. Maybe headset.
I was thinking about, you can do the yoga certification, although you are not a yoga teacher. I'm not a yoga teacher, but I was thinking, are there also people finishing the yoga, the third one, and they are not a yoga teacher, so they are certified, but they are a coach?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question. Do you, Steve?
Sorry?
I think Fabienne's asking if, even though she's not a yoga teacher, she can do the yoga teach one, whether she gets certified with that.
Yeah, you can also get certified as a yoga, as a EIP yoga teacher.
Yeah, so we certify people in EYP, not as yoga teachers. So now, depending on the country you're in and your insurance and all the rest of it, that's a different thing. We're not going to teach you anatomy or the technicalities of a downwards dog or anything like that.
Yeah, because I've seen in my coaching that they use the wall as a support, as a resource. But then I was thinking it was a really good example how Patricia was using the wall, but that was not a resource. It was the body that was the resource, and the bones that gave the support. So in EIP, they are always using the body as resource, and that is what I really like. Yeah, you understand?
What do you want to do with it? Do you want to do coaching? Do you want to do it in your own?
Yeah, when I'm also in this class, and I'm really enthusiastic to use it as a yogi, to do the class in another way, in an embodied way. So it's really nice to learn more about it, and maybe later in my work and coaching, I'm not sure, use it also, combine it.
Yeah, you can do it in both. And this focus just for now is on the sort of yoga side, and then the next hour will be more on the coaching.
Yeah, so
it's pretty wide applications, but let's go yoga a little bit. So Patricia, would you be willing to show a sun salutation? And let's kind of take it back to yoga and something that most yogis have seen before for now. So if you could just do like a regular sun salutation, much better than mine, I'm sure. Can't hear you. There we go. Okay, so sun salutations is a thing you'll see in many, many styles of yoga. There's lots of different ways to do it. Patricia just does her normal one. We'll go over the different packages and stuff at the end if people have got questions around those. Okay, so Patricia could do this purely on a physical level, you know, stretching her hamstrings, stretching her Achilles, working her quadriceps, nothing wrong with that, purely physical level, right? Or let's break it down and from a sort of EYP point of view. So even this beginning position, so stand pose, right? Or an inner pose. So stand pose is an EYP pose, which is like, what do I stand for? That in itself is an emotionally significant pose. Yeah, or she's got it with the palms out, which is slightly more like an open or a yes pose, being receptive. She could do it with the feet a little bit wider, and then it becomes more of like a solid stand pose. So that's not before the yoga, that's the first yoga pose, right? Just some people just don't stand up straight. They don't have that backbone. That's emotionally significant for a lot of people. And then she could do the variations like the more inner version, where it's like kind of going in with the feet together, yeah, or the slightly more open version that she was doing before, which seems to be more her sort of habitual style, yeah. And then if she goes back into the sun salutation, the next pose we see in there is here. So reaching up, we call this Transcendence Pose, yeah. It's okay, people can see, I can see enough. So the arms are high in the air, and there's this sense of reaching up. Like try that if you're watching this, try that, just reach up even if you're sitting in a chair. It brings a different quality to how you are, the transcendent quality. Yeah, that already is going to uplift people. If people are a bit depressed, that's a great pose for them. Uplifting, we talk about being uplifted. Okay, next pose. Forward bend, there's our letting go pose we talked about earlier. Okay, so again, we have the significance there. Then next pose. Okay, so we have a plank pose. So again, we talked about the pushing pose, the feeling of strength, having boundaries. Next pose, the Chaturanga again. And then if we stop on there, here we've got a fuck yeah. Okay, so particularly if she puts her head back, lets her jaw go a little bit, we can bring her heart in, a bit of passion is here, right? This is not letting go, this is rah, yeah? It's a little bit more oomph, a bit more emotion, a bit more yang in this, right? Okay, and you know, there's different flavors of that. And then we can go into the rest. Downwards dog is kind of a letting go, yeah. And then back to the start. Boom. And we've had like what, 6 or 7 poses? So even something that looks fairly simple, like a sun salutation. Yeah, let's give us some love. Let's give us some love. Thank you very much for demonstrating. I've got my jeans on. I've just had food on. You're saving me from it. I appreciate it. Patricia, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, you can take it, as you said, like observe the possibility of introducing poses along the sequence and also themes. So you can have a whole sun salutation with a standing for something, with a boundaried, with what do you stand for, and do it with that quality, or softer on the softer sides. On the receiving, on the sensuality, of course, not necessarily sexual, but feeling your body, enjoying the flow of the body. So you could go both ways, right?
Right. And also we could just give a quality to the whole flow. Like we could say, I won't make you keep jumping up and down, but we could ask Patricia, do a sun salutation, but with pleasure. Okay. Like, oh, she wants to do this one. Okay. So like, what's like Latin pleasure seeking, enjoy yourself sun salutation? We'll call this the Mexican sun salutation. Now, some people really need to learn this in life. Okay, now let's do the German version. The exact, strict, disciplined version of the sun salutation to really work on your like structure and discipline. So technically it's not so different, right? It's a little different, but the main thing is the attitude's different. And actually the attitude's what you're really practicing. The moves are just the base for that, you know? Okay, so who watching needs to practice their, and I'm, excuse my joke here, the German version, the strict discipline version, or younger version, we could say in some ways, right? Who needs that in their life? A bit more structure, disciplined. Okay, and who's got too much of that? Who could do with the more just pleasure, feeling? We could add playful version, like a fun version, right? Like a silly version, right? Like when you're doing yoga with kids, you do that, right? But you can, why not with adults? Right? We could add a, say again?
Do you want me to do that?
What if you want? I mean, it's I feel like I've made you jump around enough.
Okay, so playful?
Yeah, like a silly version.
How playful from?
Think about it as safe, as much as it's safe. So what someone's asked us, like, what are we doing? So we're playing with qualities of embodiment within a familiar structure, in this case, a sun salutation. But thank you, Patricia. But you could be using like a whole primary series, right? Or a single triangle pose. Make sense? You can do triangle pose silly. You can do triangle pose exact. You can do triangle pose pleasurable. It's the same basic pose. It's how you do it, right? Now, most people are doing two things in yoga. They're neurotic patterns and they're teachers' neurotic patterns. Okay, so mostly they're just doing the thing they do, whether it's enjoy yourself or be uptight or whatever. Okay, and they've taken on their styles wads. So it's like, okay, you've got a really uptight. I once went to an Iyengar class in Zurich. Okay, and the guy that did it was an accountant, well, not a yoga teacher. It was like exact, you know. And I was like, whoa, like this is probably not what he needed. It was probably quite good for me, but you know. Makes sense? So we're really looking at what you're really learning in yoga is the embodiment. And for most people, that's fairly unconscious. So we try and make it a bit more conscious so it can be a bit more choiceful. Cool. Okay. Thank you, Patricia. So Steve, can you people, I'm a bit confused as well. What's on offer? What are we selling these days? I don't know. So do you want to take people through what are the different things and what do they enable? You muted.
I should unmute myself. So yeah, so there are 3 different versions of the EYP. There's obviously EYP for daily life. Now, all of them include this whole week, the Embodied Yoga Masterclass tutorials, which is like 30 hours or something. So that's not a bad bonus. And then the ones which are for facilitators, where the coaches or teachers also include monthly community calls and private Facebook groups who actually get to discuss things with others, questions, all that sort of stuff.
So that is if you want to do one-to-one work, right? So it's like if you want to be a coach, you're using it in like therapy work or one-to-one stuff.
Yeah, and then so what the main difference then is with the coaches one for one-to-one work, you have coaching demos and client case studies. So you actually get to see like 30 sessions where Mark is, say, working with people using EYP. So
next,
I can actually show that in a bit. But yeah, the main one we're looking at right now is the yoga teachers. So what that has is it's yoga teachers, but it's also group classes. So the reason why it's also group classes is you look at things like the structure of workshops, how you can theme them, how you use partner work, which is obviously more relevant if you've got multiple people in your class. Group processes, trauma awareness within the classes, stuff around centering, and also marketing your classes, which are big bits. So we're looking at integrating EYP with different practices, the main bit being yoga, but not necessarily only yoga. Some of the principles are sort of across different types of practices.
If I'm talking about a yoga class, you just translate it into Qigong class or whatever you do, okay?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it has class structure stuff like cycles and seasons, which is how to start, how to end well, how to do the deep stuff in the middle. You don't do a death posture at the end and send everyone out all existentially angsty. And also in terms of qualification, because there was a question there before. So what that is to be qualified, you can do the teacher training, for example, but to be qualified, you actually need to practice with groups of people. So you might not be a yoga teacher, you might be another type of facilitator. if you want to be qualified, you have to do a certain number of hours with different people. So then you'll have a call with Vidyadasa at the end for an hour. Make sure you can actually do everything yourself and that you actually have had some experience doing it.
Yeah, most of the coaches don't want to like be a qualified teacher. They just want to use it in their coaching. Yeah, that's the general intention. Is it clear? Any questions on the package? It's on special offer till when, Steve? Like the end of next week or something?
Yeah, so it is. I think it's on at this stage. The special offer is for another 4 days. So what's that? That makes it the middle of next week.
Yeah. So normally we do a thing that's half price, just because often people are like, oh, I want to get it, and they're sitting on the fence. It just gives them a little nudge. You're no mad rush though if you want to think about it over the weekend. HB.
With regard, if I start off with the coaching one, and I can upgrade if I realize it later on when I finish that, is that still at the discounted rate then?
No.
Fine.
Yes. So there is it's not like at double the price, whatever. There's the opportunity to upgrade. For example, the yoga teachers one, if you want to upgrade to the coaches one to get the coaching demos, it's $100 more. So
okay, that's fine. I just wasn't sure because it said I have been reading about it, but yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
So it's once you complete the course, there'll be that option. But if you don't complete it, then it's kind of full price. So it's once.
Oh yeah, I understand. No, that's yeah.
Leave it to you. You know more about this than me now. I don't do my own marketing anymore. This is fantastic. The team's done it all for me. I don't have to think about it. I can just teach. So I don't know what's going on. I had a great week this week though. Really nice to see all the different styles of teachers, because a lot of them have been doing it for quite a few years now. So they're all sort of really mature in it, all different nationalities and flavors. Lisa C.
Thanks. Yeah, marketing wise, I almost wish you had called it embodiment principles, because that's wider, isn't it? And I bought it because I'm not a yoga teacher, but I do want to promote it in the university. We looked at it with my university and they thought you have to go for the higher one because you want to promote it to groups of people like resistant university lecturers and probably some of them will be resistant university students too. I'm also thinking of, depending if I get funding, of embedding this within the university-wide offer of mental health support for all students. And this could go as wide as we like, to be honest with you. I've got counsellors involved. So this is really wider than just me. So we went for the higher level, the top level program. My question is, I think you've put my mind at rest that I'm okay to do this, so that's great. My question is, this call with Vidyadasa, will I have to have the group of people with me when I have this 1 hour call to see if I've passed or not? Because I'm just wondering where on earth I would do it, or is it a one-to-one call where I
one-to-one call with you?
Oh, that's good.
So
that's okay. Yeah.
Doing it. It's great to hear it spread like that. Well done. The only thing you can't do is teach other teachers, right? So we don't want people sort of like teaching other people to teach it with the university, because then it gets watered down.
Right. Could I though, the first application, my initial project, because I've got stages and projects, is just for me to do it with my students. That's what I'm doing. But redoing this with across the university and potentially across universities, it would then be for a counsellor. And as I say, I've got counsellors, some really great counsellors involved with me. A counsellor to say to one of their clients, oh, you need a bit of letting go this week, do this, have a look at this video and do it yourself. Would that be, that's in my mind. I think that would be a great application. Or do you think, no?
Right time. Okay. So you can teach people yourself. You can't teach people to teach. All right. And if you're any resource that's public, of course, you can pass on. Okay. So if there's something like on YouTube, there's a letting go pose and a no pose on YouTube.
Right.
And so you can't pass those on. You just can't be passing on stuff that's, that only you have paid for, or else we'd, if it was like an organizational access, we'd have to kind of cut a deal for an organizational access. And that's very different than a single person access. Yeah. We can talk about that more if you want separately.
Yeah, I think so, Mark, just so I'm clear. Thanks.
Yeah. Basically, you can teach who you want. All right, good. Let's leave it there. Steve's posted the link if people want to go a little bit more into it. I'm going to take a quick break and then we'll come back for the coaches part and I'll show you how to use it in some coaching. Those of you still there, those of you who are going now, thank you for your attention. Patricia, are you staying on or you have to head off now, right? Because you've got to go teach.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thanks for your help. Really appreciate it, Patricia. So it's good to see you in good classes this week. Thank you, Steve, for hosting. And yeah, we'll leave it there. And Steve, is it the same link so I can just go and come back?
Yeah, so same link will start again in like 9 minutes. So we'll do the preamble in 4 minutes, I guess. You know.
Okay, cool. See you in a bit.
I'm just going to hang around.
Hang out.
Catch ya.
I'm hot in England. What's going on? Turn the heating off.